Hello and welcome to Removing Our Invisibility Cloaks. This is interviews that I'm doing with people that suffer with an invisible illness or disability, so we can discuss our journey with one to raise awareness, to hopefully educate others on what we deal with on a day-to-day basis, because unfortunately from the outside you won't be able to see it. So today I'm discussing our invisible illnesses and disabilities with. Would you like to introduce yourself?
My name's Heather Allen. I'm 24, and the main thing I suffer with is narcolepsy and ME.
Perfect. So ME we'll discuss as ME and chronic fatigue syndrome, because weirdly it has two names. When I was diagnosed with it, I was like, why has it got two names? Some people call it ME, some people call it chronic fatigue syndrome, but it is the same thing. So just to clear that up on the interview, it is the same thing we're discussing. So let's find out a little bit about yourself. So you're 24. We've just been talking about your college course. So what are you studying at the minute?
I'm currently studying level 4 AAT accounting. So yeah, the plan is to become an accountant. I'm married, and I've been married for nearly 3 years now.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
So we'll find out a little bit about your illnesses then. So you've discussed that you've got two main ones. We are aware with chronic illnesses, sometimes we do have some on the back of that as well. So do you have a few others as well as those two?
So I've been diagnosed with depression and anxiety a couple of times. And then this is what I wrote down so that I wouldn't forget. So I have PCOS, polycystic ovary syndrome, plantar fasciitis, patellofemoral pain in my knee, joint hypermobility syndrome, and then I also have Raynaud's disease, which is like where you get really cold fingers and toes. So that's all of them.
What would you say impacts you the most? I know this is going to be a really hard question. Is the one that you suffer with the most?
So it's like a combination of, I'm not sure sometimes whether the tiredness comes from the narcolepsy or ME. So it's kind of like a combination of those two, and then the mental health side of things as well.
Okay. And what would you like to discuss in the interview today?
I feel like a lot of people, even like sort of people close to me, like really don't know anything about like what I've had to deal with. They kind of know like, oh yeah, like you get a lot of tiredness and stuff. But there's literally like so much else on the back of it. So just kind of all of that really.
Okay, perfect. I think also with fatigue, a lot of people just think that, oh, it's the standard tired feeling. I would love to have that feeling back of just feeling tired, because it isn't that. It's so much more, like you've just said. And I think if we delve into that, hopefully a lot of people will understand it a bit more. I think it's hard. It's one of those, I think until you actually live it, you won't fully understand it, but they can sympathise with it and try to.
Yeah, I think like there's things as well, like I think people realise like, oh, you couldn't go for like an hour walk maybe, but it's things like, it's not just that, it's I can't get up and go and get myself something, or you know, like if I have a conversation for an hour and a half, after that I might want to go and have a lie down because it's exhausting. And so like fatigue is not just the normal things you'd feel tired from. I think your body, like a healthy person probably would feel like a little bit tired, but you'd have so much energy you wouldn't notice. So, but like when you've got like such a limited amount of energy, doing all those little things actually like does make you feel really tired.
Yeah, and I bet you have to plan your day or prioritize what's more important, I guess. So what's more important to do?
When we went on holiday, I never used to be the one that, it was always my sister that would want to plan like every day, and I'd be like, just wake up and see what we want to do. But like when you're sort of there, so like, right, we've only got 4 days, and then you need to plan the fact that we can't do a full like day's worth of stuff. Like we can't do a morning activity and then an afternoon activity, or there needs to be some kind of nap in between, and so you then have to plan like, right, okay, well, what are we doing today? Like, what time have I got to be out the house? So what time do I need to come back to sleep? And it's just like, oh, I'd love to be spontaneous again.
Love to just get on with things.
Yeah.
So when were you diagnosed with your ME and chronic fatigue syndrome?
So I remember it very well. In year 9, just around East holiday time, I got tonsillitis. And it kind of like knocked me out for about a week. And then I just didn't get better from it. And I went to the doctors, and they said like they can do a test for glandular fever, but it's only positive if they catch it like right at the beginning. So they were like, we'll do a test. It'll probably say it's negative, but I think that's what you've got. And my doctor used that phrase like, if it walks like a duck and quacks like a duck, it's a duck or something. So in other words, if it looks like it's glandular fever, it probably is. And then he kind of said like there will be points where you'll be okay, and then you'll have like really like difficult days, and then you'll be fine again. And then after a while, I was like, look, it's not like that. It's just always at the bottom. And I think ME is sometimes known as like post-viral fatigue syndrome. So obviously what I had was a virus. And after a while, he was like, I think this is what you've got, but I don't want to diagnose it, because basically like the way I look at ME and chronic fatigue syndrome, there's no specific test. So they kind of try and rule out everything else, and then that's what they're left with. So we did like, I was like a pincushion for a while, like blood test or anything.
I can
like,
relate so much to this.
trying anything that it could be, and it wasn't. And then first I saw a pediatrician who was useless, I hate to say. And then I saw a neurologist who eventually diagnosed it about, so it started in the middle of year 9, and I didn't get a diagnosis until about May 2012. And my school were less than helpful. They basically were like, we're not doing anything until we have a diagnosis. So I obviously like there is a rule with extra help that I think you have to have it diagnosed for so long for extra time, which I understand that. But I was like, you could have helped me in the meantime. Like, you know, I wasn't asking for like months off school or something that needed approval. So that wasn't convenient to get it that late.
Yeah, that is a long waiting process. That's the difficulty with chronic fatigue syndrome and ME, because it is literally just no, you haven't got this, no, you haven't got this, no, you haven't got it. It's a ruling out list basically, and they do like to leave it a bit until, so like you said, it's post-viral. I actually had glandular fever in 2015, so I think that was the trigger. I don't think it's what caused it to be so bad as it is now. But for me, I feel that was a trigger. But they do, as you said, they like to leave it a few months or maybe 6 months after that to see if you do recover from it, because some people do.
Yeah.
But there's not enough discussion about it. So you know about tonsillitis, you know about glandular fever, you know about all of these different viruses you can get, but there's no discussion about what could happen after the virus.
Yeah.
And I think that's really important to discuss, especially with the current situation people are in now. A lot of people diagnosed with coronavirus. I don't know if you've heard, but I think it's 60,000 people in the UK are still struggling to get back to normal after coronavirus. And that's shocking that there's no discussion about it.
Yeah. Because I mean, like, I saw a friend of mine post something about one of their relatives was still feeling like really weak, like months afterwards. And I was like, that's why it's called like post-viral fatigue syndrome, because you can get it because I presume like it's because the virus can like run you down so much. But yeah, there's no medical like, we'll do this blood test, or if you like have this in your system, then that's what it is. There's just nothing.
And there's no treatment either. So there's potential there's therapy to learn how to pace yourself and acceptance, but there's no actual treatment for this. So that's important to also discuss, because we're not going to be treated. It's the hope that you're going to get better, you never know. Miraculously, you might get energy at some point. I bet you have good and bad days anyway.
Yeah. I think there needs to be something more about like addressing the fact that when someone gets diagnosed with this, they're essentially looking at a lifetime disability with no cure, no treatment. And I remember like it hit me really bad about like year 10, 11, because as a young child, like to be thrown with all of that all of a sudden when you've been like above healthy, it was a lot to deal with. And I just like didn't really know what was going on in my head either.
And I bet you compared yourself to other teenagers as well, didn't you, at that age, who were probably running around, making riots,
Yeah.
and you were just wanted to sleep, basically.
Yeah.
So we've talked about you having to pace yourself, you having to organise when you are going to do something with your day. How else does it affect you?
It's so like when it comes to revision for exams, a friend of mine actually gave me like a really good piece of advice once, because people that put like revision timetables, like that's great for you, but the worst thing I can do is say, right, on this day I'm going to do this, this, and this, because if I have a bad day, it doesn't happen, and then like, well, I now feel terrible because I've not had a productive day, and also that task I was supposed to get done now isn't going to get done. So she said, like, print out a blank timetable and then get like post-it notes and stuff and stick things on, so that if you have a bad day and you sleep too much, you can just rearrange it. So yeah, it seems like when it gets to revision, for exams, like trying to sort that out is difficult. Trying to work out like if I need to plan a route, like I look on Google Maps, and it says you need to get this first and blah blah blah, and I have to work out like how much walking is that in between. Like if it's about 20 minutes, it might be too much on top of a couple of bus journeys. And then I'll try and plan like if I need to go out the house and like about, I'll try and do it all at once and come back so that I don't have to motivate myself to get up and get dressed and get out of the house several times. So it's kind of like trying to just plan ahead and think like what needs doing then. I also try and like, someone told me once, like if you've got a bit of motivation to do something, try and do it then if possible, because it'll go like in like 2 minutes or something. So like if I think, oh, I've got a bit of energy, or I'll probably do it later, I think like just to try and do it now, because if you can do it now, well, you've got the motivation. So
Yeah, definitely. I think that's something important to understand yourself and accept that you do have episodes of energy, but they go so suddenly that make the most of it, because you are going to get drained, like you are aware. So like you mentioned today, you knew that you had to have a little bit more sleep, and it's accepting that. So acceptance is very important for ME and chronic fatigue syndrome, because you can feel like you're letting yourself down. But it sounds like you've got the best procedure, that you actually don't plan something now and you sort of you don't set things in stone. I think that's important to do that, and it's good that you've got friends and your husband supporting you, or your wife. Sorry, I don't know if you're married to a man or a woman. I want to just assume, but it's good that you've got that support.
Yeah, I mean, like it's taken. There was once a point where Stu and I were having a conversation about something, and I was getting annoyed, like, you're not understanding why I didn't do that, and he was getting annoyed about why didn't you do that, and it kind of like occurred to me, like, I don't think he realizes all the little things I can't do, because I never say them out loud, and it's very difficult from the outside, even if you're very understanding, like, all those little things, like, you can't see, you don't know they're there. So I kind of like wrote him a list of like, right, this is like the symptoms, if you were to write a list of symptoms, but then like this is all the little things that come off it. So like when you see like tiredness, it doesn't just mean I need to sleep more, it means I can't do this, or it means that's why I don't do that. And I think like communication is really important, like when you're trying to get people to understand and like especially those close to you, like a spouse or someone you're living with, like you need to tell them all the little things you can't do, because otherwise, like it's really difficult for them, because if they don't know it's there, they're not going to take that into consideration.
Yeah, it's like sometimes my husband can come in, so now I'm having a good few hours, but before this I was sleeping. I don't know what's going to happen afterwards. I'm probably going to lose the energy, and he'll come back and the washing up's not done. But he's now started to understand that I have these episodes. Sometimes I don't even have energy in the day to do anything. And that's because of us discussing it. And I think that's so important in the relationship or even with friends to just say, look, there is going to be these days where I may have to cancel on these plans that we have organised, or I may not get that little task done. Just please bear with me.
Yeah, I think like it's a learning curve, because it took me a lot of years to kind of like, I mean, it's been nearly 10 years now, but like it took me a long time to work out like what can you do, what can't you do, what's the best way to do things. And it's the same for him. Like he has to sort of like learn like what we can do together. Like I often feel really guilty about household chores. Like I don't do a lot. Like I do the washing up, I do wash the clothes. But it's difficult. I mean, my sister said to me once, she was like, "Well, what are you going to do about when like you have your own house and you have to do all those chores?" And I was like, "Well, they won't get done. Like it's as simple as that. If there is not that much energy there, it cannot be done." And I think she kind of realized then. She was like, "Oh," and it's like, "What else do you want us to do?"
Yeah, it's not like we're lazy. Like there's nothing lazy about it. It's that you have
Yeah.
to decide what you use your energy on because it's so limited.
Yeah.
So we'll talk about I can never say the word, so it's the first one that you mentioned. I'm not going to try because it will come out like gobbledygook.
Narcolepsy.
Yes, I can never say it. Thank you.
um. So it was. So like it's been several years. Like I'd been to see chronic fatigue specialists, and then like kind of helped, but not a lot. And then a friend of mine who lives in New Zealand, who also has ME, their mum said, "Oh, we found this thing called the lightning process," and like kind of we looked at this website, and it was about kind of like sometimes like when you say I'm tired, you then feel more tired. And it's kind of like it was something to do with like all the pathways in your brain and stuff, and trying to like kind of manually like reroute them and whatever. And I was like, well, I can kind of see the science behind that. And we were like, at this point we'll try anything, why not? And it was a 3-day thing, like at this woman's house, and it was, oh my life, it was ridiculous. Like I'm not that cynical a person, but it was like you need to talk louder, like to be more positive, and use your hands more, like that. And I was like, I can't do this. And I said to my mum, I was like, I can't go back. But the only good thing to come out of it was she said to me, oh, even like when you start to feel tired, you need to tell yourself, like, stop, I'm not tired. I'm not going to be tired. And I said, yeah, but sometimes I don't get that I'm starting to feel tired. It's like 1 minute I'm awake and then like a switch is flipped. There's like a blackout and then all of a sudden I'm waking up. And she said, oh, have you ever been tested for narcolepsy? And I was like, no, why would I? Because I think that's the problem with ME. Like one of my specialists that I see at the moment said, there's a lot of people that have it and there's other conditions, but it kind of gets masked by their symptoms because ME is so vague, like in terms of not everyone has XYZ or whatever, or so any tiredness sort of symptoms or anything that didn't quite add up, we just kind of swept under that rug. And it wasn't until like so I went to see a doctor and I told them my symptoms and like eventually got that diagnosed. You look at the symptoms of narcolepsy and I was like, there's so many things that didn't add up. Like I have auditory hallucinations, I can just fall asleep standing up. Like there's a lot of other little things that aren't a typical sort of ME kind of case. And yeah, that took about 14 months to diagnose, because you have to have a brain MRI, then you have to go back and see the neurologist, and you have to have an EEG, then you have to go back, then you have to have a sleep test, and you have to go back to them. And basically, they can only give you stimulants as medication. My doctor was like, we need to make sure that it's that's definitely what you've got before we start giving you these drugs.
So how long ago was you diagnosed with it? So I know it took 14 months to get diagnosed.
Let me think. It was the beginning of 2018. So they gave me modafinil, which is a stimulant, and that has helped with things like college, or if I go and see a film, there's a chance I won't actually stay awake through the whole thing. So yeah, that's more that's something that they can physically test for. They can see how your brain works and your sleep cycles, and they can see sometimes they have to do a lumbar puncture to test for narcolepsy is an autoimmune condition that damages the hypercretin levels, and that's the chemical that keeps you alert. So they can do a lumbar puncture and physically see the chemicals that are less and whatever. So it felt nicer to know that's exactly what I've got. And also, more people had heard of narcolepsy, I tend to find. When I say I've got ME, some people think I mean MS, and then they look at you but you're walking. Everyone with MS should be in a wheelchair. And then other people just haven't got a clue. And I found more people knew what narcolepsy was, which is great.
I think there's the funny fact of narcolepsy. A lot of people find it funny that people can just fall asleep standing up.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's the reason why people know it more. But I completely agree. A lot of people do understand it more than ME. And yes, you do get the MS. Oh, you've got MS? No, it's not. No, it's not MS. It's completely different.
Yeah.
But I did read up though recently that supposedly scans can show up the white lesions that show up on MS, but I think they're a little bit smaller on ME. So I don't know if that's going to turn into a treatment or a test. No idea. It's expanding, so I don't think there's enough research into it. But hopefully, with COVID, these situations coming on the back of COVID, maybe there will be more tests. We don't know.
Yeah. I think that would be a huge thing if they could just see if there is something you have got. I mean, I was talking to one of the specialists I see in respiratory physiology who deal with the narcolepsy side of stuff, and I was like, do I still have ME? Do I have both? Do I have just one? And he said, well, I think you have both, because there are a lot of symptoms that you have that don't add up with narcolepsy. But it's a bit I don't know, one of when I had my PIP renewal assessment thing, she was like, well, when you feel tired, is that because of the narcolepsy or ME? I was like, I don't know. Where does one stop and the other begin? I know narcoleptics are often hypersomniacs. We sleep a lot, 14, 16 hours a day. I do that, but I like I said, there's a lot that kind of just crosses over, and I have no idea where one stops and the other begins.
It's hard because specialists don't know either. So hopefully in the future, you might know. Never know. Hopefully, fingers crossed.
Maybe in about 40 years.
Yeah, maybe. When we're old and fragile anyway. So let's talk about your other conditions then. So you said that you've got polycystic ovaries?
Yes. So it's so funny because I have a memory of being about 15. And at this point, I'd had a couple of boyfriends, but literally there was no chance in hell I was pregnant, to put it not explicitly. So I'd had maybe a couple of months or maybe a few months where I'd not had a period, and I was like, oh my God, am I pregnant? Because like I'd never heard of anything where you missed periods. So I was thinking like, oh, I'm pregnant, like I've not had sex. But I panicked for like a split second because I didn't know any other reason why it could be. And it wasn't until I must have been about 19 maybe, and someone had said something to me. I think my sister got it as well. So I went to the doctors, and they kind of like they have three little like factors, and you have to tick 2 out of 3. So absent or irregular periods is normally the first one you tick, and then they try and do a blood test because sometimes you can have abnormal like chemical levels. So they did that, and that all came back fine. So they were like, well, the third thing is we've got to do an ultrasound and then like an internal scan to check your ovaries, which was not comfortable. And they said like, yeah, that's what you've got. And then like it was kind of just left there, and I was like, okay, well, you just told me there's like something essentially wrong with my ovaries. And I was reading Joanna Fletcher's book, Happy Mum, Happy Baby, and she talks about like she was diagnosed at about 15 or something, and there was like all these like papers given to her about like the different topics of PCOS, and one of them was fertility, and the doctor was like, oh, don't worry, you won't need that like now. And then like she was like, okay, I won't need it at 15, but when I get older, like when is someone going to tell me about potential issues? And it wasn't until I had the implant in, the contraceptive implant, and the doctor there said to me, the example she gave was something like, because I thought like, does this mean infertility or what? Like, and the example she gave was, you can have a room full of people who are infertile, and a large amount of them might have PCOS. But if you had a room full of people with PCOS, only a small amount of them would have like strong fertility problems. And that kind of like calmed my mind a bit. Because otherwise, like I didn't know anything about it or what.
Yeah, so you read infertility and you think, oh, that's me done, like I am going to be infertile. But there are people that have babies with polycystic ovaries, same with endometriosis, but there is a chance of being infertile, unfortunately, with the issue. Yeah, the internal scans aren't nice, but I'm glad that you've got an official diagnosis and you knew what was going wrong.
Yeah.
I think the issue with these types of illnesses like endometriosis, polycystic ovaries, a gene, I can never say the other word, there's another version of endo. It's never discussed in school when you have your period talk.
Yeah.
So you have your period talk and they just say, this is how you use a tampon, this is how you use a pad, blah, blah, blah. But there's never any discussion about what your period should be like and shouldn't be like.
Yeah.
And I think if that was highlighted, then we'll get diagnosed potentially quicker because we'll go to the doctors about it. Like you didn't go until you were 19 and you had the issue at 15.
Yeah.
Because there isn't that awareness, and I think that is something that needs to expand in schools, that children need to know what they're looking out for because there is abnormalities with a period.
Yeah, definitely. And I think like like you said, there was nothing for if you don't have periods regularly. It was all just every 28 days you will have this, and it will all be the same, and it will all be regular. And so I was like, okay.
Yeah. And it's also like the sexual intercourse discussions that you have. So I suffer with gynecological problems. So I've been tested for endo because I have a lot of pain during intercourse. And you just think that's normal. You think, oh, yeah, the first one's going to hurt. Maybe it is going to just continue to hurt the rest of my life. But it shouldn't be unenjoyable. Like it shouldn't be painful. But that's never discussed as well. So there obviously is a lot that needs to happen in education. Luckily, we have Google these days because we get a lot of our diagnoses from Google because it gives us more information.
Yeah. Potentially dangerous.
polycystic ovaries then, are you trying for children or anything like that, or?
So we kind of basically said that once we kind of move out, we would look at it then, because at the minute we're living with my parents, which kind of works as it is, but obviously is not ideal for bringing a child into the world. But that's the other thing, like, that I worry a lot about things. And you will never know if you have problems conceiving until you try and conceive. And obviously, if you try and conceive, you might have a baby. So because we're not in the position, like housing-wise, to have a child, we can't try for a baby and see what happens, and then be like, oh, turns out we don't have any problems, but we're now having a baby.
No, we got the baby when we didn't want the baby.
Yeah. So it's difficult. But I also can't take my stimulants whilst being pregnant. So there's going to have to be a lot of planning, like, what would I do job situation wise? How much could I cope with? How much could I not cope with? And all of that unknown stuff, like, that's what makes me really anxious about things.
Yeah, it's hard when you know that there could be potential issues in the future, because they're always going to be on your mind if it's something that you want to do. So some people obviously don't want kids, but if you want kids, it is something that you question. So I question it. We were going to plan to have kids, but at the minute, my ME is too bad to even put that thought into our heads, because I can't look after myself most days. So a child isn't really something we can do right now. But I suppose it's just holding on hope, because it's looking at the successful cases. There is successful cases out there, and it's holding on to hope that you may not have that issue.
Yeah.
But then it's also knowing the other routes. So there's obviously adoption, fostering, surrogacy. There's those types of things. It's just to stay positive, and hopefully in the future you can have your child when you're ready.
Yeah. I mean, like, I don't feel at the point where, like, I've given up hope. There's just, like, a lot of worry, like, surrounding that hope.
So fingers crossed. It's just something that it's just a worry. I can understand why you worry, because I'm a worrier. I always worry about so many different things, and my husband's like, "Can you just shut your brain off?" I'm like, I can't. It just thinks of these different things all the time. But yeah, it is understandable. So fingers crossed, you just have a little slight worry and you have no issues.
Yeah.
So I know you mentioned depression and anxiety and those types of things. I think depression's, a lot of people with a chronic illness also get depression.
Yeah.
Because of the whole, you feel like you're letting yourself down, or it can affect you mentally.
Yeah.
Is there any other issues that you want to discuss, or any conditions?
I have a lot of, like, weird symptoms. This is what I wrote down. So I get a lot of auditory hallucinations with narcolepsy, and, like, really severe nightmares, like my family being shot, or, like, really drastic things that you see in a horror film. And, like, during lockdown, my parents were staying at my sister's. So she goes to work, like, at 1:30 in the morning or something, because she works night shift. And it was the first time I'd had to really sleep on my own. And it would have been okay if it weren't for the fact that I get, like, hallucinations, like, in the middle of the night. And my auditory hallucinations, the majority of the time, think, like, I can hear someone downstairs or something. And obviously, when you think there's no one in the house, that is scary as hell. I get a lot of things like tenderness with my skin. So, like, if someone pokes me and I'm like, ow, and they're like, I didn't poke you hard. I'm like, I know, but I feel like it feels like you just poked, like, a huge black bruise.
Do you bruise easily as well?
Not really, which is why it's weird, because I like, you'd think the two would be linked.
Yeah.
I also have this thing, like, if I reach for something and I can't maybe overreach slightly, it feels like for about 30 seconds it feels like I've pulled a tendon, like, really badly, and then it just goes. And the other thing, the worst thing at the moment, is brain fog and memory problems. Like, brain fog is the most annoying thing possible. It's the way I described it to someone once. It's like your brain has like a database full of words you know, and it's like you're mid-sentence and someone hacks in and just deletes that word. So like you go to talk, like this word you've used loads of times before, and you're like, I don't know what the word is that I'm trying to say. And it is frustrating as hell. It's like that feeling of having something on the end of your tongue, like magnified. And memory problems is the worst at the moment. I've had to go and see my doctor because I'm like, is it normal for it to be this bad? Like I can forget something. The second like something else comes into my mind, that other thought is gone, and it is like never coming back, gone. And ironically, I was supposed to have a telephone appointment with my doctor to discuss it during the week, and I forgot that I had it. So now I have to phone up and be like, can I have another appointment? Because I forgot about the appointment to do my memory problems.
It gives an example though, I guess.
Yeah.
Like, oh.
This is how bad it is. I forgot I had an appointment.
I forgot I had memory issues.
Yeah.
I think a lot of those link. So ME, I know, has the connection with brain fog. It's so hard to explain to someone what brain fog is, though. Like, I think you've just gave a really good example that it's not just a tip of the tongue thing that a lot of people have, where there's a word in your vocabulary and you're trying to think of it. It's that you've got this filing cabinet, and that filing cabinet's all of a sudden just gone, and you can't even search in that filing cabinet because it's disappeared completely.
It's the frustration that comes with it as well. Like, it's not just like, oh, that's a little bit annoying. It's like, I know this word and it's not there.
It's a difficult one, but hopefully when you manage to remember to speak to your doctors about it, they can look into it more. I'm hoping there's nothing serious going on, but with you struggling that much, I think with you studying at college and all those types of things, it would be nice to get answers to it.
Yeah, I have a photographic memory. So it's quite hilarious because like the stuff I can remember long term is pretty amazing, I think. But like short term, I'm like way below average.
I would love to have photographic memory.
It helps sometimes with brain fog because I'm like, I can picture how a word looks on paper, and it's kind of like that image is still lingering in my brain, like at the very back of it. So I'm there like, it's a word, it's got an A in it, and it begins with an F or something. So like at least if I'm trying to describe it to somebody, and I'm like, oh, this is the definition, and they're like trying to guess all these words. Like if you can kind of give them some clue about how, like what letters are where, like you can narrow it down a bit.
It's like a word game.
Yeah, I'm just playing Hango. What was it Hangman used to play as a kid?
That's a good way of doing it, though, I guess. So I've enjoyed talking about your conditions. I think I'm gonna try it this time. Narcolepsy. Oh yeah, I did it. That's the first time I've managed to do it properly. I think that's really good to learn about. Because people know of it, but they just think it's sleeping. They don't understand the tests that go into it, and it is a very rigorous testing process. And I'm glad you've got a diagnosis on it.
Yeah.
All your other conditions have been really good to talk about as well because they affect so many people. Have you received discrimination at any point in time because of these conditions?
Yeah. So there's there's two things I thought of. The first thing was when I had my PIP assessment. I've had it twice now. I had the renewal one, but the first one I had, a friend of mine helped because she said, "Are you eligible for PIP?" And I was like, "Well, no, I tried like years ago." And she's got MS, and she's sort of like, she kind of asked me about my symptoms and stuff, and she was like, "I think you would be." And we filled in the form together, and there's so many loopholes. Like I remember one of them was, are there any rooms in your house not accessible? And I thought like, okay, if you were in a wheelchair in a house with stairs, you would stay upstairs. But I kind of thought, well, no, I've been to all the rooms in my house. And she was like, well, what about times when you can't get up? And I was like, oh. And there was a lot of other things like that. The questions are so badly worded to trick you. And so I had my first assessment, and she said to me before, like, just be like brutally honest, like tell them about the worst days. That's fine. And she kind of like it's really draining mentally to go for an appointment like that, because there's a lot of things that happen when you've got a chronic illness that you try and sort of like put to the back of your mind a bit, just because if you had to like deal with all of that at the front of your mind, it's a bit too much. So when you have to go and say all of the things that you cannot do, like you just come out feeling really crap. And on top of that, like it felt like she was attacking me with certain answers. Like, oh well, you just said you could do this on like a good day, or you just said that like, oh, every day is like this, or something like that. I can't remember what happened. And like, luckily my mum was in the room, and she was like, actually, no, that's not what she said. And I was like, just sat there
They
like,
pick out all these little wordings.
yeah,
I had an issue with mine. I had to appeal mine because I opened a curtain, so I was fine. Yeah,
yeah,
I opened the curtain. It was a good day that she came. But they PIP assessments are so debilitating. Like you're constantly judged by that person there. You forget stuff that happens as well. Like I forget so many things I can't do on the spot. Like when someone asks me something on the spot, I can't list it all off. I just forget some of it. And it, like you, it's so frustrating because they pick these little words that you've probably worded wrong. And they go, oh, I'm going to take that. And she's not eligible for it, or she's not eligible for the higher points because she's told me that every day she can do this.
yeah.
And there is a lot of discrimination by PIP assessors. I completely agree with that. Like they don't understand that there's bad days too.
I understand like the fact that because there are people that fraudulently apply, like they do have to make sure that you are like, sort of like eligible for it. But at the same time, like I think for invisible illnesses, like applying for a PIP is just horrible.
It's difficult because it's hard to prove. It's
Mm,
hard to prove what you go through daily because they can't see it. And
yeah,
like for me, like with my mental health, she went, oh, she was smiling, so her mental health's fine. But
yeah.
we can disguise things so well.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. The
What
other
other discrimination have you received?
um so the first school I had wasn't great. We won't name names, but when I had, so it started like they knew about it like early on, and there was no pastoral support at all. Like even when I said, look, I haven't got the official diagnosis, but they think I've got ME. Like you either don't know what that is, in which case just Google it, and the NHS will tell you in 5 minutes. Or, there was nothing like, oh, she's got extreme exhaustion. Should we check she's okay? Should we check that she can keep up with all of her homework? Or that she isn't killing herself trying to revise for exams? It was just, well, you're doing well in exams. Like, you're meeting every, like, target, whatever. And, like, it was, my form tutor was the only one who I could say really supported me. Like she was like, right, we're not gonna have you doing PE, like too exhausting. Like you're doing an hour of exercise at the beginning of the day. There was a woman in SEN who did like Reiki treatment, and she was like, you can go and see her, that might help. And she was also there a lot, like pastorally for me to talk to, because I had the support at home, but sometimes you need someone who's like not emotionally attached to you, that can like is not going to cry when I cry, kind of thing. And I eventually, like when I got the diagnosis, I went to see the head of, it was either the head of the year or the head of Key Stage 4 or something. And I had a meeting with him and my mum, and his first response was, well, can't you just take sleeping tablets and then you'll sleep during the day and you'll be fine, sleep during the night and you'll be fine during the day? And I was like, are you kidding? And I was like, first of all, I'm 15, you want to put me on addictive drugs with like, and also this condition has been diagnosed by neurologists with PhDs in medicine. Like, you're a sports teacher, so no offense, like, you're not exactly qualified more than a neurologist. Do you not think if that was an actual possibility, she would have suggested it? And then his second response was, well, maybe we could find somewhere for you to sleep during the day, like just have a nap. And I was like, we're not talking about like a 10-minute nap and then I'll be fine. I was like, first of all, it's a school, where am I going to sleep? And also, like, you know, you can get like 45 minutes for lunch or something. I would need like the entire time to sleep. And even then, I'd wake up probably feeling worse because it's not enough time to sleep. And also, when do I eat? And, you know, like you're in GCSEs, so you're in a 5-hour day, you don't get any freeze. And because of that, like, it really impaired the relationship between my teachers. Like, I had so many good teachers, and not just good, like, teacher-wise, but as in, like, that I could have trusted and gone to and said, look, I'm really struggling. But the problem is, like, all I needed sometimes was to just be like, look, can I just leave the classroom? I'm starting to fall asleep. I don't want to fall asleep in front of my entire class. Really embarrassing. Can I just leave the classroom? And because, like, when you go up to, like, the head of Key-Stage 4 or whatever, and he doesn't support anything, you know, I said, oh, can I, like, where we've got double periods, can I spend the second period in the library or something, where it's quiet, where there's no one else? If I fall asleep, if I need to take a break, it's fine, you know, I'll still do the work. And he was like, oh, I don't know. And I was like, look on paper, like, my attendance is great. I'm getting all A's and A stars. I'm not the kind of pupil that is going to just, you know, think, oh, I'll just wag this period and not actually do any work. And so, like, you know, these things I was suggesting, like, he was just really critical about. So it's like, I wasn't then going to go and tell my teachers, oh, look, can we put this thing in place or whatever? Because if you've kind of had the, not really no, but if you've had that response from the up here, you're not going to then go and tell your teachers, oh, can we put this in place? Because it feels like you haven't had that kind of like, oh, what's what I'm looking for? You haven't had that clearance. You haven't had it approved. Approved, that's what I was looking for. So it's like, you don't want to go up to your boss and say something, and then they don't really approve it, and then you go and tell someone lower down, oh, let's put this in place. Because it's kind of like, you know, you feel like you're stepping on people's toes. And I was 15, like, I wasn't old enough to be like, you know, I didn't want to feel like I was being rude to authority figures. So that was really difficult. And as a result of it, like, I think part of it was the fact that it was before we talked about depression as much. So I know now from what I got diagnosed with that I had depression in year 11. But it was never addressed because I thought, like, look at my life, you know, I've got 2 parents that are great. I've got a happy family life. I've got a home. I've got friends. I've been well in school. So there was no way I would have ever gone to a doctor's and said, look, I think I'm depressed. Because in my mind, I thought they were going to laugh me out and think, well, she's a bit like that herself. And like I said, we didn't talk about mental health like that in school. It wasn't like, look, you can be completely like fine in terms of on paper what your life looks like, but it's still okay for you to be like, I thought you had to have, like, you know, like the loss of a parent or something that was going to cause depression. I didn't think you could get it from just looking what seems like a normal life. And it wasn't until I went to sixth form that I realised this is actually what a school should treat you like. You know, like the pastoral care they gave was brilliant. They would want to know about all my hospital appointments. They would let me out of lessons when my attendance started to get really bad, they were like, okay, well, look, we're a bit concerned. And they said, how are you keeping up? And I told them, right, okay, well, this person is sending me their notes. This teacher is emailing me a PowerPoint of what they've done in lessons. And they said, look, so long as you meet your like end of topic grades, that shows us that you're keeping up. So we don't mind if you're not at school as much. And it was like, this is what I needed. Like I needed that support, that backing, because at that point when you're first diagnosed with something, you don't really know what's going on, and like you need someone to show you like this is how it should be. And so then when I went to college, a couple of years ago, I started at Tamworth College. It was like I knew what to do. So when they said, how do we need to help you? I knew, okay, well, you need to do X, Y, Z. Whereas like before, the first school hadn't even asked, how should we help you? It was just like, you look like you're doing fine.
It's really unacceptable. And I'm sorry that you had to go through that. But I'm glad that when you went to sixth form and you went to college that you had that support that you needed. It's a lack of education again for invisible illnesses, because they're so aware of the visible ones. They don't seem to know how to tackle the ones that are hidden, because we look fine on the on the outside. We can put a smile on our face, we can push through. But sometimes when you over push yourself, you make yourself worse. So that's why those things need to be set in place.
Yeah.
So would you give any
advice? I think
it
didn't help the fact that like, so when I left school after GCSEs, I look at my GCSEs. So what do you think?
So you was talking about your GCSEs, that's fine.
Like I can look at my GCSEs and think they're good results. Like I don't look at them and think negatively. I did really well. But there are results I look at and think actually like that wasn't what I should have got. And I think from my teacher's point of view, again, like they could see like what had happened, and it was like, well, you don't look like you're doing badly, so there's clearly not a problem here. And I had like a German exam, and so I'd read. Sorry, it's just.
It's all right.
There was it was a listening exam. So I'd been in separate rooms for like all my other exams, and they could have these rest breaks, so you could like pause the time, get up, and then go back. And it was on the day of the exam, and I got an exam in the morning, and then I said to them like, oh, what's happened in the afternoon? Like, where am I for my German exam? And the head of exams officer was like, well, you just with everyone else. And I was like, what? And they were like, well, it's on the CD, so you're going to have to be with everyone else. You can't just pause it. And I was like, I found out afterwards, like, that actually what you could have done is, like, sometimes you can put a pupil in isolation. So, like, I had it at sixth form where I'd got 2 exams back to back, and they give you, like, 15 minutes or whatever in isolation in between. So, obviously, when you sit the second exam, everyone else has come out of the first exam, but nothing's compromised because you've been in isolation. So afterwards I was like, why couldn't you just put me in isolation, let everyone else sit the exam, and then come out, put the CD in the room with me, and then you can pause it because it's just me in the room. And, you know, as a result of that, like I resat so many, I wanted to get all those main stars. So there were several subjects where I'd resit like an exam or a module, and with German I resat a couple of the control assessments you do in class, which is a lot of effort, so that, you know, if I did like a little bit worse in the exam I'd still get an A. And in the listening I don't know how I even got a D in that exam, because I don't remember any of it. I remember starting to feel a little bit tired and thinking like, I'm trying to write in this box and it's not happening. And then the rest of it was just a complete blackout. And they just didn't do anything about it. And it irritates me still to this day. And the woman who was my form teacher was like, you need to let it go. And I was like, I know I do, I'm just not very good at that.
Yeah, I think just because of that type of authority should have had the stance of supporting you, and it is hard to let go when you've been let down
Yeah,
because they are of a higher figure. They're a head teacher. They should be able to support you, and
yeah,
they've basically failed you by not doing that.
yeah.
So I know you've been through a lot. You go through a lot already. You still do. What advice would you give to someone living with an invisible illness condition, or someone that's potentially getting diagnosed with one?
I would say that if you can find someone who suffers anything similar to you do, like that is really helpful. Like a friend of mine, um, she had a stroke, and she's had a lot of problems like cognitive wise after it, and tiredness stuff. And we went out for a chat once, and it was really lovely, just because sometimes it's very isolating. I don't know many people at all. I've got one friend who's got fibromyalgia that I've only just met in the last few months. And other than that, I don't know anybody else to talk to about it. And so, like, if you can find someone who's just got a little bit in common with you, you just don't have the same diagnosis, it's just nice to have that, like, oh, I feel like someone gets me.
Yeah, it's
Um,
good to have someone that fully understands you or understands some of your conditions and
yeah,
symptoms. I think it's important to know as well that there's so many support groups on social media now. So
yeah,
there is going to be an easy way of finding someone that has that issue.
yeah. I think the only thing would be, like, you don't want to make demands as a disabled person, like, you should do X, Y, Z. But you also need to not be afraid to say, like when I started college, to be like, right, this is what I need you to do. Because there's, at the end of the day, like they are required to make adaptations for disabled people. And so, like, don't be afraid to say, look, actually, this isn't working. Can you do something else? Or, like it took me a while to be like accepting that I was disabled. Like it was only about a few years ago, like when we went to the airport, that I asked for wheelchair assistance because we went to Dublin and we flew on the way there. By the time I actually got out of the airport, I said to Stu, I said, I'm absolutely knackered. Like I really cannot walk anymore. So we booked it on the way back, and it was just like such a relief. Like the weight off your shoulders, like I don't have to stress about this. Like I don't have to kill myself trying to get just to the terminal. And I think I'd never thought about it before because I never really thought like I was disabled as such. It was always just like, well, you've got a disability kind of thing. And I just kind of thought like, oh, I don't want to like seem like I'm making a big song and dance out of it or whatever. And it's kind of learning actually like I need to know if I can't do this, I need to say I can't do this, or I need to have a wheelchair to take me there. And it doesn't matter what anyone else thinks. If I know I need that, I need that.
Yeah, I think it's so important that you've mentioned that because a lot of people with a visible disability do not class themselves as disabled because
Mm.
they feel that you have to have a visual impact or you have to have an aid, but that's not the case. There's like the sunflower lanyard. It's there to highlight that there's other aids that you may need. It doesn't mean that you need a wheelchair, a walking stick, or anything like that. It's just that you may need that additional support.
Yeah, I think as well. Like I get so anxious about when I'm in a wheelchair and then I stand up and do something. Like especially like so we went to Alton Towers recently and thought we'll hire a wheelchair because we're not walking. The entire place is literally all uphill or downhill. So there were some times because my husband has got a problem with his hip. He was like, I can't push it uphill or I'm going to struggle getting it downhill. So between the two of us, it was like, okay, well, look, if it's a difficult bit, I'll push the wheelchair up. And then, like, when it's flatter, you can push me and give my legs a break. And I kind of felt like the whole day, I just worried so much that someone was going to think, like, oh, well, like, why are you doing that? Or you just got off and got out of a wheelchair. You clearly just want like the right access pass or whatever. And they don't realise like to get the right access pass, you've got to show evidence anyway.
Yeah.
So, but that's just the worries you have, and it's like this irrational like fear that everyone is going to judge me because I've got a wheelchair but I can walk, and there's not enough like if you have like a blue badge parking space, you know, like I need to know that if I got out of that I wouldn't feel like everyone was like, oh, you just can't be asked to walk.
Yeah, it's just knowing, it's just understanding that there's invisible conditions that can impact us, but it may not impact us as much as someone in a wheelchair, but it may also impact us as much. It's just hiding, it's just hidden. So it's just that understanding and that support that you need. So it's been amazing speaking to you. I've absolutely loved hearing about your conditions. Is there anything else you want to discuss before you go?
I'll probably remember in about 2 hours' time and tell you, but no, not at the moment.
But yes, I forgot to say this. It's all right. Don't worry. We can always have another chat at any point in time, but I would like to thank you for your time and enjoy the rest of your day.
Yes, thank you very much.
Thank you.